Namaste everyone. Welcome back again. I'm Yugank Goyal, and this is going to be our sixth module. In this module, we're going to discuss the infinite number of different kinds of governance systems, the self-governance systems that is witnessed across different parts of India, particularly rural India. So, the question that so the first segment should be the question that we faced after independence. So how did so much diversity come together without breaking at the village level? Let us begin by placing ourselves in 1947. When India became independent, it was not one neatly organized administrative unit. It consisted of 560 plus princely states and with the British administered provinces. In fact, at that time, we had 300 districts and almost double the number of princely states. Right, so you have a situation where you had more rajas than district magistrates, so to speak. Each princely state had a local ruler, and each ruler had his or her own way of administering justice, collecting revenue, interacting with villages, organizing the spaces, etc. So, customs, laws, everyday practices, they differed widely from place to place. Even today, we have more than 800 districts, around 6.5 lakh villages. Think about it. Think about it this way, that when these princely states merged into one nation, this meant that hundreds of different types of governance systems were brought together in a single national framework. But we don't hear about any village collapsing, any systems collapsing. In fact, India has one of the lowest number of policemen per 100,000 people, per capita. In most part of the world, particularly in the developed world, but also in comparable developing countries. Given that, our crime rate is really, really low. We do not hear of widespread administrative confusion in everyday life, whether in rural area or urban area. And so the question is not how India really became independent. I mean, there is a deeper question. And the deeper question is, how did villages continue to function even when the political authority above them changed completely? And so to understand this, it helps us to compare two historical moments. Partition led to intense violence, social breakdown, but the amalgamation of princely states did not lead to this. Why did one lead to chaos while the other did not? And the answer lies in where unity was actually rooted. You see, across India, villages already had functioning systems of self management. Take, for instance, tank based irrigation system in present day Tamil Nadu, especially in the districts like Thanjore and Madurai. These tanks were maintained by villagers themselves. Decisions about desilting, water release, repair, they were taken really locally. The functioning of these tanks did not depend on whether a ruler was a Nayak or a Maratha or a British, or anyone for that matter. In fact, even after independence, these systems have continued because they were embedded in ordinary daily life. In the Deccan region in Maharashtra, villages relied on community councils to resolve disputes. That could be related to land boundaries, debt, inheritance, and these councils were functioning very independently of the princely courts, for instance, in Satara or Kolhapur. When political authorities changed, these villagers still knew where to go to resolve conflicts. In UP and parts of Haryana, village elders played central role in dispute resolution. In fact, they continue to do so. People approached those who knew their families were involved, understood the background of the dispute, and they could mediate without escalating conflict. These practices existed long before formal courts became accessible to villagers. In Jharkhand and parts of Odisha, especially in the forest dependent areas, village communities they followed collective rules governing access to land, forests, and water. These rules were enforced through community consensus rather than state authority. Even when princely states merged into India, these systems of collective decision making they remained intact. So what do these examples show us? They show us that villages were not waiting to be governed. They already knew how to manage their everyday affairs, which was hardly dependent on some ruler far away. And so unity was not created by just drawing new boundaries on a map. It existed already because villages across the subcontinent they shared philosophies of local governance. Now these governance practices could be different, but the philosophies, so your customs, language, maybe some methods were differing, but the philosophy of decentralized governance. It's funny to say decentralized because for a decentralized governance, you need to have a center. So might as well call it polycentric governance systems. That existed everywhere. That is what defined, in some sense, India, continues to define us. And so when national laws and policies were introduced, after independence, or they keep getting introduced regularly, they do not fall on empty ground. They rest on existing practices of cooperation, trust, and self-governance. And that is why, sometimes when the laws don't match the new rules that have been promulgated through state capitals or the national capitals, when they don't converge, when they don't chime with the local practices, often local practices evolve in order to either absorb, adjust with the laws, or they simply bypass the laws, and the local customs therefore take precedence. This is something particularly important for us to understand, and there's huge amount of literature written on it but without using this frame, right? So you have questions on legal pluralism, for instance. They talk about the same thing, but this is why India's unity, therefore, it cannot be understood only through constitutions, institutions, rules, and laws. It must be understood through these communities, through the strength of these communities. The nation did not teach villages how to live together. Villages created a nation where diversity could function without breaking. In fact, diversity is a characteristic feature. It's not an exception to our governance systems. And this understanding becomes therefore foundation for everything that follows when we talk about Gram Swaraj or village self-governance.